Hi, my name is Asia Jackson, and this is my video project for Organizational Leadership 680, Session D2. My chosen country for this project is Mexico, and I hope throughout this presentation you learn something new. Thank you, and please enjoy. Why did I choose Mexico, and what is so special about Mexico? I'm a fifth grade teacher, and the student demographics at my school are at least 60% Latinx. Majority of this percentage of students identify as Mexican. Mexico is often in the media for immigration, drugs, and violence, but I wanted to know more about the business aspect of Mexico. Corruption is often associated with conducting business in Mexico, and I wanted to find out if this was really true. As of 2017, Mexico had a population of over 129 million people. Of the overall population, half are considered working age. Mexico is known for placing high value on relationships and harmony, especially in business settings. Although Mexico is known for their vibrant culture, there are two major issues within Mexican business and society. Corruption, including bribery, collusion, and extortion, is very common. Corruption is often conducted by those in power, such as politicians and the police. Politicians and police are often influenced by gangs to participate in corrupt activities. In addition to widespread corruption, human rights are often violated due to mass inequality. Human rights are often violated because many Mexicans do not fully understand their basic human rights in Mexico. As previously stated, there are two major issues in Mexican business and society. Corruption and human rights, or lack thereof, are two moral issues that I will discuss. In Mexico, 35% of establishments made informal payments to ensure government contracts, and this figure is higher than that of all Latin America and Caribbean countries. Mexico's National Human Rights Commission said in November 2016 that 119 journalists have been killed since the beginning of 2000, and 20 more have disappeared between 2005 and 2015. The police rarely investigate because these crimes are thought to be conducted by corrupt police officers, politicians, or gang members. The first moral issue I will address is corruption. Corruption is the abuse and misuse of power. People or companies that participate in corrupt activities are dishonest, and corruption is a crime in many countries. A study conducted by the World Economic Forum found that corruption is the most problematic factor for doing business in Mexico. For example, mega company Walmart found themselves in legal trouble when they failed to sufficiently investigate or mitigate certain anti-corruption risks and allowed subsidiaries in multiple countries, including Mexico. Walmart employed third-party intermediaries who made payments to foreign government officials without reasonable assurances that they compiled with the FCPA. The FCPA, officially known as the Foreign Corruption Protection Act, prohibits companies and individuals from paying bribes to foreign officials in exchange for a business deal. Walmart was negligent for years, and once they were found in violation of the FCPA, the SEC charged Walmart. Walmart was forced to pay over $100 million, and the chief of the SEC's enforcement division stated, Walmart valued international growth and cost-cutting over compliance. This is one of many cases of corruption in Mexican businesses. When thinking about corruption and its impact on businesses, an organizational leader must consider what to do next. After identifying the moral issue, the next step is to identify relevant stakeholders. Relevant stakeholders can be direct or indirect, and they are individuals that are impacted by actions of a company. Relevant stakeholders in a business that participates in corruption are company employees, including their family members, consumers, and industry competitors. The next step is identifying stakeholder interest. Company employees have interest in their company because if corruption is occurring, these employees may encounter crimes against them, especially if these stakeholders are not interested in committing corrupt acts. Consumers have an interest in corrupt business because product costs could increase, resulting in customers paying more for the same product or products. Industry competitors have an interest in corrupt business because the unethical behavior of their competitor could result in potential ethical changes within their business industry. If their competitor participates in bribery, it may be difficult for a company to remain ethical, especially if they want to remain a profitable company. Now that we have identified relevant stakeholders and their interests in a company, we must consider alternative actions. Based on the Walmart example and the reoccurring moral issue of corruption within businesses in Mexico, the alternative actions are as follows. Option 1 is to implement and require compliance and training to all company employees. Option 2 is to implement internal accounting controls to monitor fraudulent activity. These are two options that Walmart could have taken, but they opted not to. Option 3 is to ignore corrupt activities and continue with business as usual. This is the option that Walmart ultimately chose in Mexico. Each of these options have advantages and disadvantages. Option 1 would be in compliance with the FCPA, and this is important because all U.S. businesses and individuals conducting business in foreign countries must abide by this law. In addition, Option 1 would help improve the general life quality for Mexican citizens at work. However, Option 1 could result in the loss of personal safety for all company employees, and there would be additional costs for training all personnel. Option 2 is very similar to Option 1 because it is in compliance with the FCPA. Option 2 differs from Option 1, though, because training would only be provided to individuals working in accounting. These employees would be responsible for observing all financial documents and finding fraudulent activities. Option 2 would incur additional costs for training or retraining current accounting employees, and if current employees are unable to fulfill this task, positions would be outsourced, thus costing the company additional money. Option 3 proposes the company does nothing and continues business as usual. This option has its advantages because it would save the company money rather than spending money on training employees. In addition, potential harm against stakeholders would be less of a risk. However, Option 3 violates the FCPA, and this would pose a financial risk by the business. In addition, Option 3 will require the company to continue the cycle of corruption, thus ignoring the moral issue altogether. The next step in determining the best option is to consider the moral principles. In this situation, the moral principles that conflict are fidelity, profitability, and non-parasitism. Fidelity, as defined by Garrett, is the duty to keep one's promises and contracts and not to engage in deception. Corruption involves deception and dishonesty, thus going against the moral principle fidelity altogether. Profitability is the maximizing of shareholder wealth in the long run, and corruption often involves bribery. Bribery, especially in the Walmart case, allows companies to expand and produce a higher profit. This increases shareholder wealth in the long run, thus making the company profitable. Lastly, non-parasitism is defined by Garrett as doing our part to abide by the rules of an institution in which we willingly participate and from which we willingly accept benefits. As an American business, companies like Walmart have a duty to abide by American laws. However, an American business in a foreign country, such as Mexico, has a duty to abide by Mexican rules and laws. Although corruption is not legal in Mexico, it is very common because those committing this illegal act are in charge of upholding the law. The common practice of corruption is deeply rooted in Mexican society, which makes it difficult for businesses to ignore. The final steps of the decision-making process are applying one of the conflicting moral principles and choosing one of the proposed actions. The moral principle that is most applicable to corruption in this project is fidelity. An author, Barlow, once stated, companies can achieve greater profitability, be great places to work, and benefit the community through acting with integrity in everything they do. This quote aligns perfectly with the moral principle of fidelity because if a company such as Walmart wants to maximize all aspects of their business, they must require honesty, integrity, and reliability from all areas. Based on the applied moral principle, Option 1 is the preferable action. This option complies with the FCPA, and the training can increase company morale. In addition, training employees on how to avoid corrupt activities in a business can lead to a better quality of life and human rights for Mexican citizens. Another moral issue in Mexico is human rights. A 2015 survey revealed Mexico City citizens were not clear about his or her human rights. This is problematic. Recently, there was an incident where dozens of people were kidnapped by police, and this resulted in the death of 6 people. A group of Mexican students traveled to Mexico City to commemorate the massacre in 1968, in which Mexican soldiers and police gunned down hundreds of innocent protesters. These students were hunted down by local, state, and federal security forces and handed over to members of a gang known as the United Warriors. Of those students that were kidnapped, 6 were killed, dozens were injured, and there are still 43 people who are missing. As with the first moral issue, an organizational leader must consider what to do next in the decision-making process. The relevant stakeholders in a company that struggles with honoring human rights include company employees and the company itself. Company employees and the company have an interest in human rights because crimes could be committed against them if they are unaware of such rights. In addition, lack of human rights is a violation of a person's basic rights. Everyone is entitled to certain rights no matter what, and a lack of rights is unfair and unjust. Based on the Iguala 2014 mass kidnapping and similar crimes against humanity, there are 2 options an organizational leader can choose between. Option 1 includes creating a formal system that distinguishes human rights within the company. Option 2 includes providing all employees with information about their human rights in Mexico. Option 1 encourages the company and company employees to learn more about their human rights, and it will improve general life quality for some Mexican citizens. However, adding the system may incur additional costs to the company, such as providing handbooks, video lessons, etc. In addition, option 1 only provides useful information for employees within the company. The information provided to employees would not be applicable once they leave the building. Option 2 also encourages the company and company employees to learn more about their human rights, and it will improve general life quality for many Mexican citizens. Option 2 has another advantage, though. Option 2 provides information about human rights that are applicable in all areas of Mexico. This option could lead to backlash and consequences for Mexican officials, such as bribery, extortion, financial harm, and/or physical harm. Lack of human rights and little knowledge of such rights lead to 3 conflicting moral principles. Harm prevention is defined as preventing harm to others from causes from other than him or herself. An organizational leader must consider this moral principle because although they are not causing harm to their employees, they are responsible for preventing harm by other people, such as the police or politicians. An organizational leader understands that human rights are often neglected in Mexico, and it would be their duty to ensure their employees' rights are not harmed. Another conflicting moral principle is respect for rights. Respect for rights says it is immoral to violate the rights of another person, such as human rights, civil rights, etc. An organizational leader understands each employee has rights. Rights as an employee, rights as a human, etc. These rights must be given no matter what. The last conflicting moral principle is justice. Justice is defined as treating everyone in the community fairly and requires that one acts such in a way that one distributes benefits and burdens fairly. Mexican citizens deal with mass inequality due to economics, and this leads to an unfair distribution of benefits or their human rights. An organizational leader understands that all employees deserve a fair distribution of benefits within a community, and when this is not happening, a business is not abiding by the moral principle justice. When considering these 3 conflicting moral principles, it is difficult to decide which one is the most applicable. However, the most applicable moral principle is respect for rights. The economic Cultural and social differences in Mexico reflect human rights inequalities, and these inequalities often result in harm done to those with little to no knowledge of their entitled rights. Frederick Douglass once said, "Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave." This quote is fitting when discussing lack of human rights in Mexico and Mexican businesses, because when citizens know what their rights are, they will no longer be a slave to corruption. Based on respect for rights, the preferable action is providing all employees with information about their human rights in Mexico. This is the best choice because it will increase company morale and the information can be shared with other citizens. The information can be utilized anywhere in Mexico, whereas option 1 limits employees to human rights within the company. Once employees learn of their human rights in Mexico, their employee rights will be much easier to explain and understand. This will help the company avoid possibilities of corrupt practices such as bribery, thus leading to a decrease in the first moral issue discussed. Thank you for viewing my project, and please leave feedback.